Oh man, hey, how's it going? I hope everyone can hear me. I hope everyone had a wonderful week as always. I am Anton Jackson, back once again to talk about the season 2 finale of Breaking Bad entitled ABQ. How's it going, Matt Duncan? How's it going, T? Good to see everybody and excited to finally tackle this final episode of season 2 of Breaking Bad. Can't believe that it's already been two entire seasons, more or less, that we've gone back and discussed and analyzed. But yeah, it's another unbelievable episode to follow the previous one entitled Phoenix. Definitely, I don't know if it can truly compare to the darkness and intensity of the previous episode, that's for sure. But this one definitely had some dark moments in its own right, absolutely. And of course, it was great to finally see all of these plot points that have just been building over the course of 13 episodes in season 2 of Breaking Bad finally come full circle here. And we finally get to see the payoff that had been building and building and building over the course of 13 entire episodes of this second season of Breaking Bad. And yeah, it's going to be an exciting one to talk about for sure. I'm really looking forward to getting into it. I even have my pink shirt on here. If you can see this on stream, I'm not 100% sure. It's the pinkest thing I owned. A little bit of an homage to the final pink sweater that Walter White wears at the very end of this episode. Spoiler alert, when we see the two planes collide right over his house following the unbelievably climactic payoff, which was Skyler essentially finally putting the puzzle pieces together and finally discovering that all of her suspicions were in fact 100% true. And even though it was clear that she knew, she just couldn't prove it, to really parallel the words of Charles, I guess, Chuck, oh my god, I'm blanking on a name, Chuck McGill. And as well as ADA Oakley in Better Call Saul, when there's proving and then there's knowing. And while Skyler absolutely knew that all of that erratic behavior, what is up at Joseph Wong, was absolutely Walt hiding something and lying to her, she just could not prove it. And we finally see her have the definitive smoking gun proof evidence she needed to finally feel vindicated in all of her feelings that she had been experiencing over the course of season 2 of Breaking Bad. And it definitely wasn't the case where Skyler was this two-dimensional damsel who couldn't figure it out. Couldn't be further from the truth. She knew and knew and knew, but just needed that proof. And Walt slipped up. His lying was built on a stack of House of Cards, if that's the correct reference, and the smallest little slip-up, his truth-telling while he was under the sedation medication right prior to his lobectomy surgery at the end of this episode was the straw that, I don't know, was the catalyst, was the thing that got the ball rolling and that Skyler finally figured out the entire assortment of lies that Walt had been concealing this entire season. What is up at Stone Yoda as well. But without too much further delay and jumping ahead of ourselves too much here, really excited to break down this cold opening scene. And of course, as we all know, because we've all seen this episode, I assume, many, many times before, like myself, this is the fourth iteration of this black and white flash forward scene that we first saw in the very beginning of the premiere of season 2 of Breaking Bad entitled 737. We also saw additional information from this flash forward scene, also displayed to us 2 more times over the course of these 13 episodes in the episodes entitled Over and Down, if I'm not mistaken. But it was actually pretty interesting where if you go back and rewatch this scene, I believe it's a direct, exact, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's almost a cut-for-cut remake exactly of the very first scene that was displayed to us in the premiere of season 1 of, the premiere of episode 1 of season 2 of Breaking Bad, where we see all of the themes and elements which I've discussed again and again and again. I would definitely recommend going back to my retrospective of the premiere of season 2 of Breaking Bad to see the most in-depth analysis of the pink bear representing innocence and the foreshadowing that was clearly being exhibited when it was first displayed to us, not to mention the eyeball potentially representing the eye of the universe, the eye of morality, the eye of the cartel. It's up to your interpretation. I really feel like I'd be just repeating myself here, as this is essentially the fourth iteration of this cold opening scene. And while we initially see what we saw in the premiere of season 2 of Breaking Bad, it was actually kind of interesting. We see more or less everything that was displayed to us already, where we see the body bags from the third iteration, and we see the bear, but we don't actually see the glasses that were displayed to us in the second iteration, I believe in the episode entitled Down, if I'm not mistaken, where we saw a close-up shot of a pair of glasses that definitely resembled Walter White's glasses, but of course, in hindsight, maybe it was a red herring, maybe it was misdirection. I'm not exactly sure why those were presented to us and then never displayed again. I actually discussed that as well in the first episode of Season 2 of Breaking Bad entitled 737 Retrospective, where I sort of discussed why we see these glasses here, but they're never sort of seen again. Kind of going against the Chekhov's gun premise a little bit, if you will, to be nitpicky, if that's a word, where it definitely comes across a little bit of a red herring, and where, again, there's absolute plausible deniability where this could just be a pair of glasses that greatly resembles Walter White's glasses, but of course, when we see that pair of glasses in that scene in the episode entitled Down, it's definitely meant to display to us that something surrounding the events that are transpiring on screen has to directly deal with Walter White in a manner where he loses his glasses and some sort of confrontation, etc. And while, yes, Walter White indirectly causes what's happening in this black and white flash forward scene, he doesn't directly cause it. And again, that's sort of neither here nor there. You can go back and watch my retrospective of the episode entitled Down if you want a little more analysis on that. But again, we know what this final scene eventually builds towards of, again, we see the bodies that we saw in the episode entitled Over, and of course, we finally see the further information being displayed to us, where the scene then transitions from black and white to present day color, where we see these two billows of smoke wafting into the air, this black, ominous smoke, and we are to wonder what in the world is going on here that we will undoubtedly see at the end of this episode. And it's actually kind of interesting. I was going back and wondering and trying to remember what exactly I was thinking about the very first time I watched this episode all the way back in the year 2012, where I was trying to remember what did I think was going to happen here in respect to this plane crash scene that we eventually get to see at the end of this episode. I'm not 100% sure what I was expecting. It really just, again, just based on where the plot was in the previous episode with the death of Jane and where Walter White was sort of removed from Tuco and the cartel, and how he had just done his deal with Gus Fring the episode prior, you wonder how in the world is this scene going to transpire. And of course, I don't know about you out there, but I definitely didn't foresee a plane crash of any kind happening at the very end of this episode. And it's actually kind of funny, I was listening to the Insider podcast for this episode as well, and they were sort of talking about, at least Vince Gilligan was, about how they didn't want to mislead their audience, but there definitely was some sort of intentional misdirection when you initially see that pink bear in the very first scene of season 2 of Breaking Bad, and the sort of vibe that he as a creator was likely going for and was definitely thinking would be possible that the fans of the show would interpret that something ominous is going to happen with baby Holly, because we know that Skylar is pregnant and we know that she is eventually set to give birth, and we know that it's going to be a girl, and we see this pink bear and it's charred, and we're seeing these crazy events happening, we're seeing the glasses, we're seeing the dead body. So I think that was sort of the misdirection intention that the creators were understandably thinking that the fans of the show would think is going to unfold here. And of course, this unintended consequences of this two airplanes crashing overhead as a butterfly effect continuation of him allowing Jane to die was definitely not something that I saw coming. That is for 100% sure. And it's we all know what happens in the end, but it was quite the build here. Now, we know what happens in the end. We've seen this before. We've seen this episode many times before. We know what the creators were essentially going for, but I'm just trying to rack my brain and just wonder what in the world did I think was going to happen here. And of course, I was binge watching these episodes again and again and again, so I really didn't have very much time to ruminate on all of these episodes. I'm pretty sure I watched this entire season in a matter of 2 or 3 days easily, so I didn't have weeks at a time to try to decipher what was going on here. And it's actually kind of funny if you go back and listen to the Insider podcast, where the podcast is being released on a weekly basis, and they're actually talking about various fan theories that are out there surrounding what in the world could be happening. It actually is quite funny to hear what fans were thinking in the moment surrounding these events that were transpiring here in the cold opening scene of this episode. But at Trout's Honor, how's it going? Oh, of course, yeah. When Jane's father, Donald, is eventually displayed to us at the end of this episode, and we can almost see the flop sweat coming down his face. I don't want to jump ahead of myself here. Then you sort of, the writing was on the wall there. That was pretty clear. But for the longest time, I just had no idea what in the world was going on. And of course, I mean, getting right into it here, direct continuation of the end of the previous episode. This is a pretty tough scene to watch. It's pretty tough. We see Jesse waking up the next morning trying to revive Jane, performing CPR on her, just in this desperate attempt to revive her. And of course, we've all seen the scene. It's pretty brutal. It's an unbelievably emotional scene. It's tough to watch. And of course, I don't want to editorialize too much what the thoughts of Jesse Pinkman may be in this scene. He repeats the term oh my God," again, just realizing the gravity of what he just woke up to, how his girlfriend is dead. And again, it is very sobering and very somber, and to just see him pleading out, just saying, please, please, please don't have this not be exactly what I think it is. Have this not be exactly what it looks like. Please, by some miracle, be revived somehow when I'm doing these chest compressions to try to revive you of CPR, with CPR. But of course, it does not work. We see Jesse absolutely overcome, eventually resigned. It's a tough scene. I mean, it's a brutal scene to watch. Yeah, I mean, it's a penny for your thoughts, as the expression goes. I mean, like I've talked about, there's so many scenes over the course of this unbelievable show where, like this scene right here, there's very little dialogue, very, very little. It's just Jesse panting and saying, come on, oh my God. And of course, this final parting shot here, we can only imagine just the millions of thoughts, figuratively speaking, of course, that are just running through his head again and again and again here in this scene. And I mean, just to, you can only imagine what he's thinking about, how, of course, I mean, he had these fleeting thoughts and hopes and aspirations that he and his girlfriend would somehow go to New Zealand and somehow get this $480,000 in cash there and live happily ever after. Like I talked about in the previous retrospective, that's kind of, for lack of a better term, that really seems to be the thoughts of impaired drug users, where it's no way physically possible to get that much money through customs undeclared in New Zealand. It's definitely flight of fancy of these two characters, but of course that's sort of neither here nor there. In the exact moment right here, not wanting to be too, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not wanting to be too, trying not to talk about the scene with a total lack of empathy. There's the phrase I'm looking for. It took a while there. But, of course, in the moment, Jesse, I think, is also realizing how the person that he loved, Jane Margolis, is gone. I mean, that's a very sobering fact to ruminate on for sure, just the finality of her existence. And, of course, as he will say later to Walter White when he is found in the meth house, the heroin house, whatever you want to call it, the Hyacinth House, if you're a Doors fan. I'm not sure if that's a direct one for one comparison, but as he says to Walter White, I killed her. It was me. I caused her to relapse. This is my fault. And you can imagine thoughts like that are entering his head as well. But of course, despite the great amount of emotional empathy and feeling sorry for oneself that he's exhibiting towards Jane and himself, there's also a seemingly biological desire for self-preservation here, where, of course, following this, he then calls Walter White and understands that if he does not get some help here from, yes, Joseph Wong, a kid named Finger, he's in a lot of trouble here, and his freedom definitely depends on it. So the biological innate state of self-preservation and wanting to continue on definitely still permeates through Jesse. And it's a pretty sobering scene here as well, where Walt went home. He went to sleep. He's up pretty early in the morning here again. We're not exactly sure what time Jesse woke up following him using H and becoming incapacitated, but it definitely seems as though Walt is here in his front room, in his living room, waiting for this phone call to take place. He knows that this phone call is coming, and of course, like clockwork, it comes. And it's a pretty powerful scene here for sure. I can't do it justice explaining it. I'll play a little bit of it right here.
Yeah. Slow down. Slow down. And just take a deep breath. Do it. All right?
I mean, pretty powerful scene here. I'd love to play it all, but of course, for copyright purposes, I cannot. But yeah, Walt is definitely feigning as though he does not know why Jesse is upset. A pretty powerful scene here. And despite on the surface to Jesse, Walt is coming across as very emotionally empathetic, despite how they left things. It's actually quite, again, it's quite twisted, for lack of a better term, a more elegant term. It's quite twisted how emotionally manipulative and how Walt is truly just lying to Jesse Pinkman right here and right now. And again, lying is a really common theme of this episode for sure, where Walt really becomes a grade A liar, and it's really his superpower, as I've talked about over the course of season 2 of Breaking Bad. It really is what gets him out of trouble again and again and again. It's really what he found it's really what he found as a necessary tool in order to explain away his odd, strange behavior. And of course, I appreciate that at Stone Yoda. I appreciate that. Messed up there. I hope I'm not muted anymore. Thank you so much for pointing that out at Buzz and at Stone Yoda. Hopefully to repeat myself here, but as they discussed on the episode of the Insider Podcast, pardon me, I will try not to make that mistake again. This lying that Walter White uses as a critical tool in order to explain away his erratic behavior, as well as manipulate people as he's manipulating Jesse Pinkman right here in the scene right now, it's pretty messed up when someone who trusts you as much as your family realizes that you have been lying to them. Someone who truly trusts you and truly will take you at your word and truly loves you and can confide in you and trust you. And when you realize how manipulated that you've been, it really is just unbelievably painful. And you can see, as Skyler will eventually exhibit at the end of this episode, as when Jesse finds out that Walt was the one who poisoned Brock, that sort of just monumental anger that courses through his veins, not to mention when Hank Schrader realizes that his brother-in-law has been lying to him the entire time. This true, just, what's the word I'm looking for here? This true betrayal of absolute trust by someone who's so close to you, like a family member, or like Jesse Pinkman, who's essentially family in many respects. That's a debatable conversation you can have. It's pretty powerful, and you can really see the emotional hurt of the people who Walt is lying to. And it's pretty crazy, the sort of mental gymnastics and mental manipulations he will do in order to justify these actions, where the ends justify the means. And yes, I'm lying to you, but I'm doing this in order to supposedly benefit you. And of course, the sort of sadistic, twisted, messed up aspect about all this is that we learn by the conclusion of Breaking Bad that this was in many respects more about Walter White and him wanting to be alive as opposed to true altruism. And of course, I discussed that much more in depth in the previous retrospective. But yeah, this is an unbelievable great scene here. And of course, when we can hear just the panting and the panic coming through on the phone here by Jesse. Walt is trying to assure him here. Again, like I said, despite coming across as empathetic, being very manipulative, and of course saying, calm down, I know who to call, everything is going to be okay. And of course, this is then followed by this unbelievable scene here of the very first appearance ever in the universe of Breaking Bad of none other than Mike Ehrmantraut. And my goodness gracious, do I have a lot of things to say about this scene here. But prior to getting into that, let's play a little bit of the very first iteration of Mike Ehrmantraut ever in this universe. And if we only knew the backstory and how crucial and critical this character would be to the universe of not only Breaking Bad, but the eventual spinoff of Better Call Saul. Definitely didn't realize it in the moment here for sure. You definitely just think, oh, this is Saul's fixer, this is Saul's guy, his PI. We don't really know the backstory of his character. But yes, it's quite interesting to think about for sure when we just think about how critical this brand new character is who has just entered the fold in season 2 of Breaking Bad. And my goodness, the emergence of Saul and Gus and Mike really, unbeknownst to us at the time, really starting to formulate this Better Call Saul universe that is eventually going to exist down the road in 2015. So gotta play a little bit of this epic moment here at Trout's Honor for sure.
Saul Goodman sent me. Come on, inside.
I mean, it's such a great scene. Of course, the first thing that really kind of comes to mind after rewatching this is just how, with the benefit of hindsight, just thinking about everything that Mike Ehrmantraut has gone through in his life, from the flashback scene that takes place in the episode entitled 5-0, which is the catalyst and the reason for why he leaves Philadelphia and goes to Albuquerque in the first place, all of the fallout that happens and his emotional growth and trauma as a result of the death of his son, Matty. And of course, everything that follows that, of course, with him first essentially working for Saul, working for Jimmy, eventually, of course, working for Gus Fring down the line, and everything that transpires because of that is just, it's truly unbelievable to think about. I mean, I'm trying to, rehashing the entire, I don't want to have to rehash the entire story of Better Call Saul that was displayed to us in the episode entitled 5-0, where Mike comes out from Philadelphia immediately following his son's death, meets up with his daughter-in-law. Of course, right after that meeting, he goes to the veterinarian to stitch up his gunshot wound, and eventually, despite Mike saying he's not looking for that type of work, by the circumstances of wanting to provide for his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter, really the only family that he has left in this entire world following the death of his son, this is really the reason, the noble reason, that Mike rationalizes and justifies in his head for why he decides to get involved in this Albuquerque criminal underworld. And of course, with the very first job he ever takes, of course, being a bodyguard to none other than the character of Price. And yeah, it's I could go on again and again forever. I mean, that's almost like a 2-3 hour long discussion in respect to rehashing the entire story of Mike Ehrmantraut. And of course, in the more recent future, you just think about everything that transpired with Lalo and Gus and just everything that Mike has done, and how, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this is, I mean, you hate to say it, but it kind of is on a much smaller scale. It really is sort of smaller potatoes, much smaller stakes what Mike is undertaking right here in the scene compared to all of the unbelievable other tasks, the monumental other tasks of him going down to Mexico for Gus Fring over the course of Better Call Saul. That great scene when he shoots the shoes that are filled with most likely cocaine. I mean, just these unbelievably convoluted endeavors and plots. I mean, not to mention the episode entitled Bagman. I mean, I could go on and on in respect to everything that Mike did prior to this scene right here. And of course, unbeknownst to all of us at the time, and of course, we don't even know the Gus Fring connection in the moment right here, right now in season 2 of Breaking Bad. And that's actually a little bit of something I want to discuss when we finally see that great scene of Gus Fring visiting the DEA, and how that sort of story affects the complete story that was displayed to us of these three characters, Saul, Mike, and Gus, that we saw from the plot of Better Call Saul. But again, that's a little bit down the line here for sure. But of course, more or less, we see Mike clean up Jane here. Don't want to just, it's a pretty tough scene to watch for sure. We can see Jesse overcome with emotion here, following Mike cleaning up everything in his apartment, of course, getting rid of all the drugs and paraphernalia and anything that could incriminate him. And when he finally calls in Jane's death, it will just be a textbook overdose with nothing here to incriminate him. And of course, another just unbelievable scene here for sure that can't do it justice explaining, but got to play a little bit of this scene here.
Any other drugs in the house? Think hard. Your freedom depends on it.
Of course, the real money shot here is when Mike finally gets Jesse to say the line of, "I woke up, I found her, that's all I know." Jesse, of course, initially extremely overcome with emotion, almost in a state of shock, being just so introspective and internalized, just all of the thoughts that are coursing through his head, trying to compose himself here. Mike telling him that, we gotta sort of compose ourselves here in the most polite terms. Of course, the manner by which he conveys that is a little bit less subtle, as is displayed here by this great scene of Mike trying to make Jesse snap out of it, if you will. At Kate Valentine, thank you as always for the super chat. I really appreciate all the support. It's really generous of you. Hey Anton, thanks so much for giving us such intelligent insight and entertainment to us all every week. Sunglasses emoji. I really appreciate it, Kate Valentine. I really appreciate everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support you get into this channel. I really do notice it. I really do appreciate it. It really does mean a lot that people enjoy and support this channel and these streams. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Again, your words are far too kind in respect to the adjectives you're using to describe my analysis, but I will take the compliment. I really do appreciate it, at Kate Valentine. This is a great episode. It's been fun to talk about. It's been really fun to go back and talk about these these first two seasons of Breaking Bad. And I know I said that season 1 was my favorite season. I know I've said season 2 is my favorite season. And again, I forgot who said it, but it is very true, where it's almost as if your favorite season is the one you're watching currently. But it is true. There is something sort of special, and there's a sort of unique place in my heart, for as corny maybe as that sounds, for the first couple seasons of Breaking Bad, where, yes, it is unbelievably intense, and there is such a grungy, intense, unique backstory of this Albuquerque criminal underworld that's being set up here, but there's such a more lightheartedness in the first couple seasons of Breaking Bad compared to what happens over the next two seasons plus the 2-part season 5 of Breaking Bad. And yeah, it's unbelievably intense, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, I don't want to jump ahead of myself too much here, but yes, it's been fun talking about this every week at Kate Valentine, and thank you as always for the support. I really do appreciate it. It really does mean a lot. But of course, getting back into this scene right here of Mike trying to make Jesse snap out of his internal emotional, I guess, feeling sorry for oneself is probably how Mike would describe it. But let's take a look at this scene here, which I definitely cannot do justice describing.
Say it. I woke up, I found her, that's all I know.
I woke up, I found her, that's all I know.
Again?
I woke up, I found her, that's all I know.
Again? Again?
I woke up, I found her, that's all I know. I woke up, I found her, that's all I know.
Again, it's a tough scene. It really is. I mean, I know I've definitely been a little bit tougher than a lot of commentators on Jesse Pinkman, but I've definitely come around to it and have developed a much more softer side for his character, that's for sure, as I'm going back and rewatching these episodes for the 20th, 30th time. It only took 10 years, but again, this is a tough scene to watch, and you really have to be pretty cynical and maybe a little bit nihilistic to not truly comprehend just the pain and suffering that Jesse's experiencing here in this scene. And again, he's composing himself as much as he can for sure, but when he finally is met by Walt in that, I don't know what you want to call it, that crack shack, I guess meth shack, whatever it is, when you finally just see him truly overcome with emotions and truly saying why he feels as bad as he does, as I discussed a little bit when he was first being very internalized, when he finally comes to terms with the fact that Jane is dead, where he takes fault for causing her to relapse and putting the blame of her death solely on him. Of course, the very grand, dark irony in that is that Walt is definitely, if not more culpable, just as culpable with his gross negligent accessory to homicide. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the exact definitive term would be. But yeah, it's pretty tough to watch for sure. Jesse's just emotions here in this scene. And, again, it is kind of funny where just when you think Jesse has really hit rock bottom, whether it be when his parents kick him out of his house and he crashes through that porta potty and has to sleep covered in human excrements in the RV, that was really rock high, and I would almost say that this is basically rock middle for Jesse Pinkman for compared to what will happen to him over the course of the remainder of Breaking Bad. And it's truly, it's tough. I mean, Jesse is really kicked while he is down again and again and again, and of course, really seems to be the rationale and justification for the happy ending that Jesse is ultimately given in the final iteration. At least in terms of sequential timeline of the Better Call Saul Breaking Bad universe in the episode entitled El Camino. But again, I love this scene here so much. I mean, the first iteration of this unbelievable great character. I mean, I know that when I first saw this episode for the first time, I was very enticed and captivated by this new character. Again, name unknown at this current point in time. We don't know his name in this episode. It's never revealed to us. But this fixture that Saul Goodman has given to Walter White is just truly captivating. And again, in the moment here, I definitely was finding myself thinking, man, what in the world is this guy's backstory, man? Like, what in the world is this guy's deal? And if I only knew that the creators were saying, boy, do we have a surprise for you. You want to know this guy's backstory? You ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to give you even more than you ever thought you could ever imagine and experience in respect to the backstory of Mike Ehrmantraut. And again, of course, in terms of just pushing the plot forward here, I don't want to sort of dwell too much on the plot. I want to try to talk much more thematically. But of course, Mike basically saying, call it in. Your story is I woke up, I found her, that's all I know. There's nothing here to incriminate you. I'd be surprised if you were placed under arrest. If you are arrested, say nothing. Just ask for your lawyer, Saul Goodman. And of course, the real money shot here where Mike says, do I need to state the obvious? I was not here.
Priority call. There's nothing here to incriminate you, so I'd be amazed if you got placed under arrest. However, if you do, you say nothing. You tell them you just want your... I was not here.
Of course, yeah, can't play the whole scene there. A little bit unceremonious, but of course, great, just unbelievable delivery here by Mike Ehrmantraut, Jonathan Banks' Mike Ehrmantraut, where he states, so I need to state the obvious. I was not here. And of course, providing Jesse with even more information saying, put on a long sleeve shirt, cover up those track marks on your arm, the needle entry points that are inflamed, which H users have on their arm when they're shooting up H, a necessary intended consequence of the drug use. And of course, Mike basically saying, you're in the home stretch now, count backwards from 20, you're in the clear, essentially. But it's, again, don't want to dwell too much on the plot. We've all seen the plot. We all know what happens here. But yeah, it's a tough scene to watch for sure. And like I talked about, it's really it's a real... I don't know if come to Jesus is the right word for a term for Jesse Pinkman here, but there's a lot of... It's surprising for as much emotional... For as slow and... As long as it takes for Jesse to sort of grow up and emotionally mature, I feel like a lot of it is done here in this episode. Again, I don't know if that's saying the most, at the risk of sounding too conceited in respect to analyzing Jesse Pinkman's character, but again, there's definitely that line of delivery that he says in Rehab where he says to Walt, I deserve this, I get what you meant when we were out in the desert in the episode entitled 4 Days Out. That's a lot of growth and maturity for Jesse Pinkman, and really sort of exemplifying and foreshadowing where his character will eventually go. At Sam Fisher, I'm the bad guy. That's next season for sure, when Jesse again has more of that emotional maturity and the more of the emotional growth as a result of this unbelievably tumultuous and adverse experience that he has at the end of season 2 of Breaking Bad. And of course, we then see the next morning. This is the same morning following Walt placing that call to Jesse to send over Mike. And of course, Walt and Skyler are having breakfast as they commonly do over the course of Breaking Bad, so much so that it almost turned into a meme in respect to Walter Jr. and breakfast. But the key component of this meme is noticeably missing, and it's then quickly revealed to us that Walter Jr. is then overcome with excitement and with emotion when he's realizing that I'm dyslexic here. $490 have been donated into his father's PayPal account to raise money for his unbelievably expensive surgery. As the oncology surgeon said, I believe, was it last episode if I'm not mistaken? Yes. If I'm not 100% mistaken, when he reveals to him that all in it's going to cost over $100,000 this surgery. And Walter Jr. is of course overcome by the fact that it seems as though people have gravitated towards and emotionally empathized with Walter White's story. And he and of course Skyler are just overcome with joy for multiple reasons for sure. One, just probably being very taken aback by and humbled by the fact that people are emotionally sympathetic to the plight of their father and husband, but at the same time, as a rationalist and realist, they understand that they need this money really bad. Gretchen and Elliot are no longer paying for everything, according to the lie that Walt is spinning and telling them. And as we'll see later down the line as well, Hank Schrader is also soliciting donations at his office at the DEA in the DEA headquarters in Albuquerque, as we'll see prior to his, I don't know what you would call it, staff meeting, weekly meeting. I don't know exactly what the technical term would be in that scene. But of course, what's lost here, or not lost here, which is pretty damn apparent here, hopefully you can see this, is that despite his family being overcome with joy, Walt, of course, understands and knows exactly where this money is coming from, and that people, the good-hearted people of the world are not taking pity on Walter White Cancer Saint, but actually he's again lying to and manipulating his family here, where via his contact Saul Goodman and his hacker cracker extraordinaire in his mother's basement in Belarus, he is laundering the $480,000 that he acquired via an illicit drug deal through this website. And of course, to extrapolate out here, as I talked about again and again in the previous episode, in respect to, in my retrospective of the previous episode in that live stream, in respect to just the pride and the ego that Walter White has, and how we can clearly see in the moment how much this is impacting him. And of course, as I talked about in the previous episode, despite the fact he was sort of experiencing cognitive dissonance and really was up the creek here, where he wanted to take pride and ownership in this money, where I earned that money, me, but at the same time, I can't tell my family about it. So it's really I'm between a rock and a hard place here. But of course, as he came to the conclusion with Saul Goodman, this is really the best worst case option for me in respect to not damaging my pride and ego, where, as Saul Goodman says to him, what good is money that doesn't spend? I have $480K that I can't tell my family about it. The only real logical continuation and conclusion here is that I launder this money through this website, and because at the end of the day, I need access to it, and it's not just about my own pride and my own ego. And of course, the grand irony is that this is denting his pride and his ego when all is said and done. And but of course, again, just an amalgam of emotions that's going through Walter White's head here. We can clearly see why he is looking in the manner that he does, which is greatly contrasted with the ear-to-ear, was that the word? Smiling ear-to-ear that Walter Jr. is exhibiting here in this scene, but as well as Skyler for that matter. And of course, Walt will eventually, again, put on airs. Lie is the more blunt, correct term in respect to, manipulate his family once again. And again, it is kind of very, it's almost a little bit sobering in respect to the fact that in the moment here, without the sort of benefit of hindsight, where only speaking for myself, I definitely still saw Walter White as a much more altruistic character and didn't see him as selfish as he admitted that he was at the end of season 5 of Breaking Bad. It is kind of crazy where, he's how kind of twist and sick this mental manipulation is and this emotional manipulation is that he's doing to his family right here in this scene, especially when you figure in the fact that this is all allegedly done as a result of just unapologetic, absolute, without a doubt, altruism, when, as I talked about in the previous stream, it absolutely is not, where it's more about Walt providing for his family on his own terms in a manner which strokes his own pride and ego the most, because if it truly was out of just nothing but truly altruism, as I talked about, he had that blank check, Deus Ex Machina offer by Gretchen and Elliot to pay for everything, but as I've discussed again and again, which has been displayed to us over and over again and reiterated and hammered home. For example, in the episode entitled Peekaboo, just the apparent feelings of perceived, what's the word I'm looking for? Just persecution and being taken advantage of that Walter White feels that he was experienced as a result of Gretchen and Elliot. The premise of him having to go in his mind and grovel for this money was just a deal breaker in terms of how he felt about his own pride and ego. And yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of sobering to watch with the benefit of hindsight, this scene, in respect to what I didn't know at the time. And of course, I get much more into the pride and ego aspect in the previous live stream if you want to get a more in-depth take on that. At MelMC, Walt likes it. It makes him feel alive. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, when all is said and done, to really jump ahead of ourselves here to the Felina, the final episode of Breaking Bad, when eventually he kind of, does the right thing last after thinking and saying and doing all of the horrible, terrible things first, where eventually he gets it, where Gretchen and Elliot give Walter Jr. that $10 million, where it doesn't look like it comes from him at all, which of course is the grand irony, where he essentially, maybe it wouldn't have been $10 million, but I have a feeling that even if Walt would expire from his cancer eventually and pass away, you wouldn't imagine that Gretchen and Elliot would then just say, I'm going to leave this family high and dry. You would imagine that they would be, not completely financially supported, but definitely helped and taken care of and subsidized in many respects. And you definitely imagine that they wouldn't totally cut them off after this. And of course, that's the grand irony when all is said and done, is that Walt eventually realizes what he should have done all the way back in season 1 of Breaking Bad, which is take that blank check from Gretchen and Elliot. But of course, his own pride and ego would not allow him to do that. And he needed to have all of this growth and decay and transformation and self-realization and really coming to terms with his own feelings and emotions. And of course, the only people that had to die were hundreds and hundreds of people as a direct and indirect consequence of Walter White's actions, not to mention all the people whose lives were affected as a result of his methamphetamine being produced in the first place. That's a whole nother discussion in respect to the culpability of who we place the culpability of drug use on, the dealers, the users, etc. Again, I'm not a Nobel laureate. I can't have that discussion in any great detail. I wish I had the answer to that. But yes, it's a lot of interesting food for thought here in this episode for sure. And of course, following Walter White realizing that his family has discovered his money laundering operation and has essentially fallen for his alibi, we then go to again, a pretty dark and intense scene where we see Donald Margolis driving to Jane's duplex to pick her up to take her to rehab. Pretty sobering scene where he says, "How did I know you wouldn't be answering your phone? I'm going to be there any minute. I want you on the porch, bags packed, no excuses." And again, this is the last moment of bliss that he has where he still believes and thinks his daughter is alive. But of course, when he sees that gurney, that stretcher being removed from the ambulance, you can only imagine just the multitude of thoughts that are running through his head. And I mean, to be completely blunt, it was kind of funny funny is maybe not the right term, but it's kind of thought-provoking how I was kind of wondering if he had that moment in his head thinking like, God, I hope it's Jesse. God, I hope it's not my daughter. God, I hope it's that miserable smackhead. That the pleading, that hoping with the universe that the person that I love more than anyone hasn't just expired. But of course, the realization when he sees his daughter finally being zipped up in that bag. I mean, man, it's a powerful scene. It's a tough one. I mean, my goodness gracious. And again, it's so, you can just really see how, again, he's almost in a state of shock, if you will. He's not breaking down and bawling and just exhibiting this pouring out and overflowing of emotions as Jesse Pinkman did. There's clearly the look on his face is someone who was just emotionally stricken and devastated through and through. But I really like how, again, they actually talked about this in the Insider podcast, and I wholeheartedly agree. I really like how the actor played this scene. I apologize, the name of the actor is escaping me. I actually don't know it, but it's amazing how he says so little, and he's not overcome with overt emotional mannerisms and actions. He's not crying. He's not moving uncontrollably. He's not, cowering over. I don't know if that's the right term. But again, there's no real physical exhibit of emotions from Donald Margolis. It's so internalized and it's so subtle, but it's still so powerful. If that makes any sense, it's amazing how it's so. You can for how little emotion he's exhibiting compared to a character like Jesse Pinkman who dealt with the death of Jane. It's still so powerful, and to just think of how Donald Margolis just lost his only daughter, and just again, if he only knew the circumstances which led to her death, and of course just the rethinking and the replaying and the Captain Hindsight of I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have taken her with me, I shouldn't have let her stay there, I should have put her in rehab that day, I should have insisted, all these what ifs that he was going through his head, most likely in the scene, again, the term penny for your thoughts. And of course, following this, we then see I guess, I don't know if the coroner, the police detective, just taking the necessary information to finalize this process of, again, it's a sobering process of the legal paperwork to take someone from a living being to making them legally dead. Sort of, we see that happening right here in this scene. Of course, we learn that Jane's place of birth in the scene is Phoenix. Another likely direct callback to the previous episode entitled Phoenix, on top of the fact that the name of the rover that discovered water on Mars, which was on TV when Walter White met Donald Margolis for the first time, was also named Phoenix. So a lot of intentional poetic aspects here being displayed to us in this scene. And of course, we then learn, so many again, just so many powerful emotional scenes here, and just really just exemplifying that the character is truly internalizing his emotions. And again, if I only could know what was going on in Donald Margolis' head, for as creepy as that sounds, kind of wishing I could read his mind, seeing the Apology Girl piece of art that was drawn by Jane that was given to Jesse Pinkman following their blow-up, where she kind of blew him off when Donald Margolis showed up for the very first time in season 2 of Breaking Bad. The episode is escaping me at the moment. Another just more and more just re-emphasizing and emphasizing of the emotional turmoil that Donald Margolis is likely experiencing here. And of course, again, another pretty powerful scene where, again, as the I guess, I don't know what exactly what does this say, the office of the medical investigator is sort of going over the what's the word I'm looking for here? The bureaucracy. I don't think that's the right word. The logistics by which someone goes from living to dead. We then see just another great scene where we learn that Jesse Pinkman will not be accompanying Jane's body to the morgue, and only Donald will. And again, it's a pretty powerful scene here where we see just Jesse kind of shake his head and say that he won't be going as well. And of course, we see Jane being wheeled out in this body bag. And again, it's unbelievable how powerful this scene is, and just how much emotional empathy, at least I experienced, to Donald Margolis, despite him being very internalized here in this scene. And of course, following this, we'll then see how Jesse copes with his emotions, where, as I've said again and again and again, Jesse Pinkman is one who definitely tends to turn to illicit drugs when he is experiencing emotional turmoil, and is not one for talk therapy and talking through his feelings. And just as he's done again and again and again over the course of Breaking Bad, he will once again turn to maybe even speedballs. It's not 100% sure here. He definitely is likely using meth, but maybe it's speedballs. I would imagine it's both. He's sort of in that meth house, but you also see people with the tourniquets who are about to shoot up each in their arm. And just by the fact that he's so just drowsy and out of it, he definitely looks like he's on a downer, which of course would be more an indication of the use of heroin as opposed to the use of methamphetamine. But yeah, it's a pretty tough scene that will, again, like I said, this isn't even really rock middle for Jesse. It just the lower and lower and lower into the abyss, almost like the various layers of hell in Dante's Inferno, more or less. I don't know if that's the right comparison by any stretch of the imagination, but that's sort of where my mind went to for sure. At Sam Fisher, the chicken and the egg for sure in respect to That's a great scene. When I believe it was the episode entitled Pimento, if I'm not 100% mistaken. Or no, I don't know if it was it Pimento? I think it was Pimento, where Jimmy finally puts two and two together, where he realized it was Chuck who was the one who was preventing him from working at HHM, and of course that's the whole crux of the whole thing. And of course, where do you start the butterfly effect in the first place? What is the very first sort of big bang in the respect to the events that transpire after that, the cause and effect, the direct lineal continuation of getting to this moment right here, right now? But of course, as I've just wondered again and again and again, was Chuck right all along? Was he right that Jimmy eventually became what he became and Chuck was right all along? Or was it Chuck's disapproval which caused Jimmy to go down that path? And had Chuck accepted him and brought him in the law firm in the first place, would he have never done all of these things, or would have just postponed and delayed, and it would have been eventually a different iteration of all the illegal things that Jimmy would eventually do over the course of Better Call Saul? But of course, I mean, it's the counterfactual thought experiment that we can talk about forever, at least until we ever get another iteration of this universe, fingers crossed. But yeah, it's something I've thought about again and again and again for sure. At Sam Fisher, that is a great point you raise. And of course, following this, we then see the story ebb and flow back to the money laundering donations that are being achieved via his PayPal account and this website. And we can again see Skyler and Walter Jr. overcome with emotion here. Again, likely as I've already discussed, one for just realizing that there are people who emotionally empathize with Walter White and his story, not to mention the fact that they have, I believe, is it $2,800 or in this account, or I don't remember exactly how much at this time. It's almost $1,000 that he gets, but they're of course very overcome with all of this. But Walt, of course, doesn't even really do a good job feigning being surprised here in the scene, where of course he's the one who's putting all of these plot points in motions here. But again, he's so he can't even really fake being happy, as I've discussed, as a result of the fact of how much this is truly damaging his pride and ego. And of course, at the same time, I really feel like it's Skyler and Walter Jr. are just so overcome and so focused in the moment and having tunnel vision of these donations coming in, where they're probably not even really perceiving Walter White's erratic, odd behavior here in the scene. Yeah, at Stone Yoda, I agree for sure. Definitely pretty clever, hiding in the top of the toilet tank. But then again, it is kind of funny, and they sort of talked about this in the Insider podcast a little bit, how Walt's entire lie was propped up on this house of cards that was Gretchen Schwartz keeping his secret for him. And had she had sold him down the river in the episode entitled Peekaboo, the whole thing would have unraveled. And it eventually did. Eventually it did unravel, where this was sort of the one bottleneck, the one trap door, the one straw that broke the camel's back, the crack in the foundation, whatever sort of colorful metaphor or literary metaphor you want to use to describe Walter White's lies. And despite so many of them being airtight and Skyler not being able to find that smoking gun, that one lie that he told and made Gretchen complicit in was truly the one that could be exploited and was the trap door by which eventually everything came crashing down. And the point I'm trying to get to here at Stone Yoda is that, yes, he's hiding his phone here, but again, the whole ruse is totally exposed if someone just lifts the top of the toilet tank, should anyone ever do that. And again, it is so funny how, despite his lies being so airtight, they are at the same time very very flimsy as well, and very exploitable too at the same time. But that's sort of a little tangent here. But of course, we see him get the phone out of the top of the toilet, and this is of course his second secret cell phone. Again, a little bit of foreshadowing where this eventually will be the cause by which the entire story unravels. He is, of course, calling Jesse here, goes to voicemail saying, it looks like everything went well. Our guy said everything went great. Call me. Everything should be fine. Basically saying, hey, we got away with it. It's all, it's great. Nothing to worry about. We can all just move on, and we're not going to be complicit in any of this, and we can go on our very merry way. But of course, despite them maybe being out of the woods in respect to legal implications in the death of Jane, Walt is definitely not accounting for just how emotionally attached Jesse was to his quote-unquote little junkie girlfriend that Walter White described her as in the previous episode entitled Phoenix. And like I talked about in that live stream review, it's so ironic how Donald Margolis and Walt really they cared so much about about Jesse and Jane respectively, and they viewed the other person as literally just a drug user, a junkie who was someone who was bringing down the person they loved. It's so ironic, intentionally so, how Walt views Jane as a little junkie girlfriend and Donald views Jesse as just a little smackhead, when the grand irony in all of that is that there are two people who really care about them, as Walt did with Jesse and as Donald did with Jane, but neither of them were thinking about that in the moment. They were only focused on the person they loved and the person they were emotionally attached to. And it's actually kind of an interesting premise and concept that I guess I sort of want to touch on at the very, very end of this episode in respect to emotional empathy. And it's a pretty interesting discussion to have. And people much smarter than me can have it much better than I will at the very end of this episode. But of course, following it going to voicemail and Walter White leaving this message for Jesse, he's then told by Skyler and Walter Jr. that they just broke $1,000. You got to get in here. Walt, of course, feigns the fact he was just using the bathroom and flushes the toilet. And we then see him put the phone back in the tank, thus ending this scene right here. Of course, pretty plot development scene, that's for sure. Definitely a plot development scene. Lots of foreshadowing that happens here in this scene. And it really gets the ball rolling in respect to everything coming crashing down for Walter White at the end of this episode. But yes, of course, following this, great scene here. If I can find the exact beginning of it, but you gotta love the, where is it exactly? Gotta love the intentional irony of this shot here, where Walter White's picture is just in frame of the wanted, the placard reading "Wanted," where of course the grand irony in all of this is that Hank is trying to put the puzzle pieces together and find out who is this Heisenberg, but unbeknownst to the entire DEA, they are collecting money for Heisenberg's surgery here, because Heisenberg is none other than the brother-in-law of Hank Schrader. And just unbelievable scene here for sure. Again, so much comedic humor here interjected here in respect to the largest donation getting a six-pack. Again, I don't want to do it justice doing a horrible regurgitation of this clearly comedic aspect that was written here into the scene. But of course, without wanting to just regurgitate the plot too much here, everything that we saw transpire over the course of Season 2 of Breaking Bad is now being displayed to us and being told to the DEA. Of course, everything that we got to see as the audience unfold on screen is now being presented to the DEA, where essentially in respect to the plot development of this episode, we learn that ever since Combo was killed by an unknown assailant in the episode entitled Mandela, the blue stuff has disappeared out of town. And of course, Hank then surmises that someone wised up and stopped shitting where they eat. And of course, following him doing some digging and rejecting the concept that James Edward Kilkelly, who was arrested as the Heisenberg Kingpin in the episode entitled Better Call Saul, was their man, Hank then says, again, if I can find the exact shot, it might be hard to do, the great poster that he holds up of, again, I can never find the exact thing. Let's see.
Mastermind, you believe that? No. I've been thinking. Top local police departments, small town Arizona.
There we go. So again, him putting together as much as he can from all of the evidence that he has available to him at the DA. We learn that ever since Heisenberg did the deal with Gus Fring, we can see that the blue stuff has been popping up all over the country, with the exception of New Mexico, of course, not appearing in Utah either. That's a sort of another sort of discussion and why it would sort of make sense. Maybe I'm sort of extrapolating out too much here why they wouldn't find any in Utah, but that's a sort of another discussion. But of course, Hank comes to the realization that someone wised up and stopped shitting where they eat, and basically says that I think Heisenberg's still out there. I think he's gone regional, only he's right here in town. Of course, Hank is essentially completely spot on in his analysis, but again, he just can't find that smoking gun as Skylar is hoping to find in her sort of web of lies and deception from, ironically, the exact same person, Walter White, at the very end of this episode, where he definitely realizes that Heisenberg is still out there. He's gone regional to an extent where he's partnered with Gus Fring, again, currently unknown to the DEA as well. And Gus Fring, being a very cautious man, is not going to sell the blue stuff right in Albuquerque when that's the only place where it was initially being found. And again, we don't know the sort of misdirection that is being presented here by the creators. Oh, I apologize at Matt Duncan. I think the thing I didn't want to say, maybe I'm giving Utah too much sort of credit here. I did not know that, but I don't know. I gave Mormons too much of the benefit of the doubt. Maybe again, I don't know Utah very well. I was definitely maybe speaking out of school here. I do know it's a dry. I don't know if it's definitely not a dry state at Utah, but I know it's definitely much more strict. You can definitely quote me if I'm wrong, Matt Duncan. It's actually kind of interesting to think about, just in kind of understanding the concept of federalism and how states have different laws. But is it true in Utah, Matt Duncan, that if you want to order a drink at a bar, you have to order food as well? Or am I totally wrong on that? I've definitely heard that. I don't know if that's a vicious rumor, but is that true? Where if you sit at a bar, you also have to order food, or is that am I totally wrong? And if what I know about Utah just totally off base, and am I totally ignorant to all of that? I definitely love to know. But yes, I sort of maybe I'm being very discriminatory here, and I thought that everyone in Utah was more like Mitt Romney, and that's sort of where I was alluding to here. And again, I don't know, maybe that's what the creators were intending here about why they didn't didn't put any in Utah. Maybe they were being very I don't know what the right word is here, very biased or very superficial, and just assuming that everyone in Utah was much more above board and wouldn't be using this stuff. At Matt Duncan, you can order a drink without food, but alcohol content is all super watered down here. That is interesting. I did not know that. I really do appreciate that information. I definitely know that the laws are stricter in respect to, I would imagine, I mean, there are a lot of states there where there's some states where you can't buy alcohol on Sunday, I think. I don't know if it's definitely states, but there's definitely some counties and all across the country where laws are much stricter. But again, maybe I apologize for having my ignorance be on full display here at Matt Duncan. I do apologize in respect to my lack of knowledge of Utah. But yes, I wonder if that's why the creators didn't have any in Utah. They sort of generalized and were sort of, had all these preconceived notions that everyone in Utah was a upstanding Mormon. But I actually did not know the meth problem that they have there. I was totally unaware and ignorant to that. And I do appreciate the insight at Matt Duncan. At Trout's Honor, Kegs from Wyoming. I think I see what you're getting at there at Trout's Honor. But yes, at Matt Duncan, I do appreciate that. I do appreciate the insight. I always do love to learn here. And I always wonder, I definitely noticed that, because he said, everywhere but here is what Hank said. But of course, there's none in Utah either. So again, I wonder why the creators of Breaking Bad decided that. And I wonder if they had any sort of preconceived notions in respect to the state of Utah, which I did not know you resided at Matt Duncan. At Smokeless Choice, I went to some bars in the past that watered down their drinks. It's like instead of putting an ounce of liquor in a drink with Coke, they put in half an ounce. Yeah, I don't know if that's done for Puritan reasons, but that's also likely done for, to make money. The less booze you give, the longer the bottle lasts, the more you can charge, and the more drinks you can get per bottle, the more money you can make. That definitely seems like a pretty standard affair when owning a bar. But again, maybe I'm slandering the good bar owners of America here. But again, really feel like, that's why I feel like, definitely don't want to discuss things I don't know too much about for sure. And I want to definitely try to steer clear of topics that I'm not an expert in. I don't want to be one of those people on the internet who is loud and screaming and pontificating on things they have absolutely no idea on. So, yes, want to try to steer clear of that genre of the internet. But of course, Hank is spot on in his analysis for sure. And of course, I think we all know this as well. I actually made a video, a little bit of a tangent here. We all know as well that that story that Hank says about Combo being solo rep, that outside of him stealing a baby Jesus from the Knights of Columbus Major, this guy was solo rep. He wasn't on our radar. And of course, we then learned in season 6 of Better Call Saul, in the episode entitled Waterworks, that Kim was the one who was his public defender. And of course, I guess I'll try to I think I have the scene right here, but let's see, play a little bit of the scene for sure to just sort of display the backstory tangent that I was talking about.
Shot dead by an unknown assailant last month. Combo, I hear you say? Why, I'm unfamiliar with that name. Was he a Nobel laureate, perchance? No, he was a dipshit wannabe banger. Now, no arrests, save for stealing a baby Jesus from Knights of Columbus manger back when he was 17.
So, of course, we then realize that following this, we then learn that in this scene where very serendipitously the two paths of these characters just happen to cross, where Emilio is meeting Saul for the very first time and Kim happens to be signing her divorce papers at the very same moment, sort of worlds colliding, the odds likely being astronomically small, millions to one if not more, definitely resembling the meeting of Donald Margolis and Walter White that I talked about in the previous episode. But we then learned that that story was written in right here when Jesse makes small talk chit chat with Kim Wexler.
You're a lawyer, right? I recognize you. You defended my buddy Combo, Christian Ortega, Juvie Cord, Soul Baby Jesus. I mean, not like a real baby, just one of those things.
So yeah, I made the entire video on it, but yeah, it's kind of cool. Gotta love the attention to detail and having little tiny throwaway pieces of dialogue that don't really mean anything, and aren't too consequential to the overall storyline. Eventually being displayed to us all the way down the line in what the second to last penultimate episode of season 6 of Better Call Saul. So yeah, pretty cool tangent there for sure. And of course, following this, we then see, yes, at John Doman exactly, we then see the continued just myopic focus and tunnel vision of Walter Jr. and Skyler being just so taken aback by and so immersed with the donations that Walt is getting. We then see Walt, of course, sitting there not being nearly as enthusiastic, being trying to put on a little bit of airs that he's excited about all of this. But of course, at the same time, this is then interrupted by the fact that he then gets a phone call from Saul, or he calls Saul, it's not 100% clear to us, where Saul's guy finds him. But of course, on the phone, Saul is definitely insinuating that there's an issue here and you don't want to go to where your guy found him. But of course, Walt is being completely dismissive of any of Saul's reservations, saying, Saul, shut up, Saul, just give me the address. And of course, following this, we then see Mike and Walt outside of this, meth house, if you will, and Mike basically telling him the implicit dangers of going in here, not to mention, on top of the fact that he may get just shot or stabbed by some junkie in there, APD's also been known to sit on this place and would be very suspicious if they see you go in there, a seemingly normal person, and would definitely cause their red flag and radar detectors, metaphorically speaking, to go up in respect to what is this seemingly normal person doing in there. But despite Mike's reservations, Walt decides to trudge in here. And yeah, great scene. I love this scene here where Walt is confronted by this drug user here, and definitely him likely being taken aback by seeing someone like this as well. But you gotta love how Walt just utters Jesse's catchphrase here of "yo," and that is seemingly enough for this gatekeeper, if you will, who is preventing Walt from getting in. And it's a pretty great scene here. Yeah, at Stone Yoda, when Walt says "yo" with his little street guy mannerism, I burst out laughing every time. Yep, it's still funny. It's still funny after 20 times. That's for damn sure. At Stone Yoda.
Yo.
So soft and so subtle, but it's such a great scene. But of course, eventually, despite, we're seeing all the riffraff here, and we're seeing all of just the people who are just, stricken by this drug use. You can only imagine the backstory of all these characters here likely being just as complex and nuanced and in-depth as the two main and supporting protagonists of Breaking Bad, where they all had hopes, dreams, aspirations, families, backstories, personalities, and, they've all been inflicted by this drug use. And maybe a little bit of a foreshadowing of a Ghost of Christmas Future of where Jesse's life would eventually turn up turn out or eventually end up if he kept going down this path and wasn't intervened by Walter White, where, Jesse basically says, I'm good here, man, I'm good right here. Walt saying, no, you are not good. And again, it's a tough scene to watch here when we see Jesse Pinkman just break down in tears. And, again, as I've talked about already in respect to all the scenes of Jesse Pinkman eventually foreshadowing and leading up to this scene of just Jesse taking personal responsibility for the death of Jane and basically saying, I'm the one who killed her, I caused her to relapse, it's my fault, I killed her, I loved her. Walt trying to insist that, you didn't kill her, it wasn't you. But Jesse, of course, taking the personal accountability for it. And again, it is pretty, again, I need to get a thesaurus and find a better word than a sobering that I keep reusing again and again and again. But just to juxtapose and compare the way Jesse Pinkman is handling his perceived culpability for the death of Jane and contrast that to Walter White, who knows he was absolutely complicit in the death of Jane, and the way he is rationalizing her death and he is justifying why he should not feel the way Jesse feels. It's pretty intense. And as I discussed in the previous live stream, how Vince Gilligan talked about the episode of the Insider Podcast for Phoenix, how it is pretty crazy how human beings have the capability to rationalize really any behavior, and how even people who are doing horrible, terrible things can rationalize it in a manner where they think that what they're doing isn't bad. And as Vince Gilligan said himself, to use the ultimate example of this, the Führer of Germany from 1933 to 1945 did not think he was a bad person and rationalized what he was doing as good, as Vince Gilligan said, being the ultimate example, truly just exemplifying how any behavior can be rationalized by human beings. It's the very, again, I'm going to use that term again, it's the very just sobering fact of reality of the capability of human beings. And, despite human beings having the powers to do good and to love and to, embrace positivity, it is kind of, it's intense to think about how they also have the capability to rationalize immoral behavior. And again, yeah, I'm no clinical psychologist here, so I'm not the best person to have this conversation. But yeah, it's interesting food for thought, and it's crazy things to think about. That's for sure. And we then see this scene here being the precipice for Jesse realizing that he's got to make a change here, and rehab is really the only decision for him. And he knows he can't just wallow in his own self-pity and take these speedballs and, try to emotionally cope this way. And the next time we see Jesse, he will be in rehab that is bought and paid for by Walter White. And of course, prior to this, though, we see Donald Margolis go into his daughter's apartment. This is the very first shot we ever get of Jane's apartment. And I was sort of wondering the overall premise of this scene, on top of just further displaying to us the emotional state of Donald Margolis, where maybe it's trying to display as though it seems Donald Margolis is able to internalize and not be overcome by grief and guilt that he was clearly exhibiting in the first scene that we saw of him when the coroners take away Jane's body, and how eventually it seems as though he's okay, but of course we clearly know he's not, because as a result of emotional turmoil, he's eventually going to crash 2 planes into one another, killing over 100 people. And at the same time, I think this scene, on top of that, is meant to display to us the sort of life cycle, the growth, decay, transformation, the circle of life, as is the term mandala, the sort of Buddhist premise that was the reason for that title, where it starts with the death of Combo and ends with the birth of Holly, or Scholar going into labor. But again, I think it's very intentional here, where we see for any, Greek, Egyptian mythology fans, we see the Ouroboros here, which I think was very intentional by the creators, the serpents eating its own tail, which again is meant to display the life cycle of life as we know it, just the birth and death life cycle. And it's very intentional here, where we see We see a pink teddy bear as well, a little Easter egg, intentional for sure by the creators, but we see Donald Margolis picking out the outfit that Jane will wear, likely in an open casket for her memorial service, and, trying to find the right thing to wear. And of course, this is then immediately juxtaposed with, the death of someone's daughter being immediately juxtaposed with the birth and the beginning of the end of life being immediately juxtaposed with the beginning of life, as is, the concept of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, mandala, all these other literary mythical analogies that are clearly present and on full display here in season 2 of Breaking Bad. And it's it's definitely where my mind is going in respect to all of these literary thematic elements that are presented to us in this wonderful episode and over the course of this wonderful season. And of course, as I said, we see this scene here of Walt with Holly, and of course again, the sort of, I don't know, I'm at a loss of words here. But again, we see more of just Walter White's pride being dented here, where it is kind of funny where he can only put on an act for so long, is what I was trying to say, I suppose. Where, yes, he's trying to feign the fact that this cyber begging, as he sees it at this moment in time, is a good thing and will help pay for his cancer surgery. The constant dinging and the sound effect of the cash register ringing being a sound effect which is overlaid every time someone donates finally irks Walt to the point where he tells Walter Jr. to please turn that off under the guise of it's upsetting the baby, when really he is the one who's being upset by this because of the way his own ego is being damaged here in this scene. Of course, to add insult to injury, we then learn that Marie talked to a patient that she had. She's a radiation technician, and one of her patients works for the local news and is going to do a feature story on Walter Jr., talking about this website he's created and about the donations that are being received for his father as a result of his cancer surgery that he needs to undertake. And again, I know anyone who's watched the local news has seen human interest stories like this on the local news or has read about this in the paper, as is what is initially being described to us here in the scene before we realize that a full-fledged local news story is going to be created. But of course, it really just adds insult to injury here. Seems to be the premise of the scene where Walter White's ego is just further and further going through the ringer here. And again, it's really the cognitive dissonance, if you will, where he wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to be the one who can take ownership and pride in the one who earned this money, but he also wants to be able to use this money, but he's not going to be able to do it unless he somehow finds a way to launder it and use it cleanly. But there's no way to do that without diminishing his own perceived accomplishments and his own entitlement to the sort of praise that he feels he deserves for what he undertook to provide for his family. So yeah, just the irony being on full display here for sure. And of course, following this, just what an unbelievable scene is this scene is right here, where we see Gus Fring show up at the DEA headquarters for the first time. And of course, definitely didn't notice at the very first time. We were not even focusing on these background characters, but you can see Gus Fring very subtly in the background. They intentionally hide his face prior to the reveal that's displayed to us later down the line. But I love this sort of very subtle shot that you can see of Gus, so it's hard to see. But they purposely hide his face here. And of course, when you're watching the scene right here, you're focused on the main character, the most senior ranking character in the universe of Breaking Bad, and you're focusing on the scene from Hank's vantage point, not even thinking about the people that are maybe walking in the background to visit him. But of course, we then see that these are, donors to the DEA who are wanting to get a tour and seeing essentially what their donations are paying for. They're pillars of the local community who own businesses. And of course, we then learn that one of these donors to the DEA is someone who we've already met before in the episode entitled Mandela, and is none other than Gus Fring. And I have to say, that reveal when the camera pans to Gus, and of course I definitely didn't notice him in the background the very first time I watched the scene. What a great reveal. Definitely didn't see that coming. Such a power move by Gus Fring, where he is right in the heart of the lion's den, sort of the last place that the DEA would ever look for a kingpin, right under their nose in the DEA headquarters. And it is, again, so telling and so crazy to think about how, you know, the two people they are searching for, the people that Hank really wanted to find and was right under his nose the entire time, how Heisenberg's picture and the person he partnered with are literally standing right in front of him right here and right now. The irony is just insane. But I love this reveal here. I love this reveal. And yeah, I'm just going to play it here real quick.
Supervising Agent Hank Schrader. Agent Schrader, I'd like you to meet Andrew Kaufman of the Adobe Hotel.
Hey, Kai, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Paul Conterna of Conterna Real Estate.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
Good to meet you.
And Gustavo
What a
Fring
reveal.
of Los Pollos Hermanos.
Please, just Gus.
Hi, Gus. Gotta tell you, you guys make some killer chicken.
What, I mean, the way Gus is just able to hide in plain sight, I mean, it's unbelievable. At Stone Yoda, such a slick way to get information about what's going on with Walter. That is a great point at Stone Yoda, and that is actually something I want to touch on that you brought up right there. And of course, I don't want to repeat everything that happens here in the scene, but essentially Hank describes the sort of most basic fundamental aspects of the DEA operation here in Albuquerque, where despite them having some local success, at the same time, you know, the supply is apparently growing more regionally. And it's pretty interesting to sort of look at the scene right here. And it's actually kind of funny that you mentioned that at Stone Yoda, the sort of way to get information. But I'm actually going to play this scene right here in respect to sort of how I viewed it in the moment versus what was revealed to us in Better Call Saul sort of changing and impacting this scene. So just want to play it real quick.
It's my brother-in-law. Yeah, he's...
Oh.
Hank. Gentlemen.
Thanks.
Sure, thank you.
Is this one of your agents?
Oh, yeah, no, it's my brother-in-law. Yeah, he's got a health issue. We're trying to...
Oh, I'm very sorry. What sort of health issue?
Lung cancer.
Oh, that's a rough one.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of funny. I remember when I watched this scene for the very first time, when Gus asked Hank, is this one of your agents? I definitely thought that Gus Fring was trying to learn this information for the very first time. And in the moment, I think it's definitely very plausible where, of course, he's trying to get inside information any way he can. It definitely doesn't hurt to do this sort of reconnaissance by any stretch of the imagination. But when I watched the scene for the very first time, I did actually think that Gus was wondering and being sincere when asking, is this one of your agents? Because I thought he didn't know, but what's actually quite ironic about this is that we know from the backstory of Better Call Saul that when Mike meets with Saul in the episode entitled Breaking Bad during the flashback scene, depending on your vantage point, Mike tells Saul that Walt has cancer. And of course, we know that Mike knows that information and absolutely could have told it to Gus. And at the same time, Saul asks Mike, what does he who shall not be named think about it? And of course, he doesn't think anything about it. He's small potatoes. And you do wonder, you would imagine that, again, despite that sort of piece of dialogue being there where Mike says, you know, Gus doesn't really care about him, he's small potatoes, you would imagine that Gus would already know this at this moment in time. And what's actually kind of interesting here, it's almost as if Gus is sort of putting on airs where he's trying to maybe find out more personal information surrounding Walter White and his cancer diagnosis. And of course, even if he did know this, which he likely did based on the backstory of Better Call Saul in the episode entitled Breaking Bad in season 6, these are absolutely, he's feigning ignorance here on purpose with the benefit of hindsight. So in the moment, while I definitely thought he was not privy to this information at all, just based on that scene in the episode entitled Breaking Bad, it definitely seems as though he's putting on airs and trying to inquire even more information. Yeah, at Stone Yoda, I mean, I thought about that for sure. And I definitely, I mean, when I watched the scene for the first time, I definitely wondered if Gus really thought that Walt was a DEA agent who was also selling meth. But just based on what Mike told Saul in that episode, which was years prior to this, at least 3 years prior, while Mike said, as you're saying at Stone Yoda, while Mike said, Gus doesn't think about him, he's small potatoes, I would still imagine that Mike told him this information and wouldn't just tell Gus, wouldn't just tell Saul. And definitely speaking as well, Mike would have also told Gus this prior to him doing any deal. But of course, the grand irony in all of this is that we don't know the backstory here. We don't know the full backstory. We don't even know that Mike has any relation to Gus Fring whatsoever. That's sort of the again, really making us view this show in an entirely different perspective. And it's interesting food for thought. And Peter Gould was spot on in respect to viewing Breaking Bad in an entirely new light. That's for damn sure. But of course, again, a really powerful scene here through and through, where Jesse sort of has a come to Jesus moment where he realizes that, like I said earlier, going to therapy is his only option. Walt, again, providing him with some plot details, saying he's not going to be around for a while. I'm getting my surgery. Should I not make it, as the surgery is quite risky? Saul has your money. Of course, trying to get Jesse to also snap out of it, saying you're not responsible for any of this. Dwelling on it does not help the situation. We just need to move forward. We can't change the past. We can't focus on the past. We can't keep continuing to ruminate on the past. We only can move forward. And again, pretty powerful dialogue here in the scene that I've alluded to. And I definitely just, as I've said again and again, can't do it justice to have to just play it.
I get it. What you meant. I deserve whatever happens.
Again, Jesse sort of, it's interesting. Again, it's like I talked about a little bit earlier in respect to Walt's rationalization versus Jesse's rationalization. Walt does not view what he did as, I would say, that bad. Yes, in the moment he understood that again, it's a sort of philosophical question where the ends justify the means, where again, it's not a direct apples to apples one-for-one comparison, but you pull the train switch that causes the death of one person, but you end up saving multiple other people. And in Walt's sort of rationalization, yes, he caused the death of Jane, but he's saving someone he personally cares about much more. He's sort of letting this nameless, faceless person die in his mind in order to save someone who's very close to him. He doesn't view what he did as bad as what Jesse did. Jesse clearly thinks, he's coming to terms and saying, I deserve this. I'm a bad person. I'm the bad guy, as he'll say next season. Sort of what Walt was alluding to in the episode entitled 4 Days Out, where he's saying, I deserve this. I'm a bad person. I lied to my family. I deserve this. This pain and suffering and emotional turmoil that I'm experiencing right now out in the desert, I deserve this. I'm a bad person. I did bad things that made me deserve these actions and the consequences of my actions. And Jesse's saying essentially the same thing. I deserve this. I deserve what I'm feeling right now. These horrible, emotional feelings that I'm just overcome with now, or just, I deserve them. I am a bad person. That's what Jesse is absolutely alluding to here in this scene. But at the same time, it is kind of, like I said, the point that's being hammered home about how it's crazy how human beings have the ability to rationalize any behavior. And at the same time, though, of Jesse detoxing here, again, I'm lucky to never have known, someone too close that's ever abused H. But you do hear the withdrawals are absolutely horrible and horrendous, like the flu times 10. In respect to just the sweating and the fatigue and the incontinence and the tremors. It's pretty terrible. So again, Jesse does look kind of okay here and kind of not as worse for wear as one would think someone going through a horrible detoxing of H would be going through here. But you would imagine that Jesse's going to be experiencing that for sure. And of course, the story then flows back to this news story, and much to Walt's chagrin, this local paper here, this local story from a newspaper has completely blown out of control in Walter White's mind. Is actually going to be a television story on the local news. It's again, to add the insult to the injury to the insult to the injury here for Walter White. Marie's basically saying, "Where were you? We called you like 50 times." Walt then eventually realizing what's happening here and how the damage that he thought would be done to his ego via a local news story in the paper is magnified even more so by the fact that he has to be on the local news here in this scene. Again, it's pretty ironic here where we can see Walter White not exhibiting the apparent happiness that he should be feeling here, and the sort of the ambience and the message that this story likely wants to capture here by filming this local news piece. And of course the dialogue here where Walter Jr. says, "My dad is great. I can understand why people would." Well, basically saying my dad's the best. He would never do anything wrong. He doesn't deserve this. Of course, the grand irony being that he has done a lot of terrible things to put himself in this situation. And it's, again, that's pretty obvious and apparent when you're watching this scene. But a sort of more subtle theme in this episode that I didn't really notice the first time was actually the fact that the grand irony in this is that this news piece is supposed to be celebrating the achievements and the accomplishments of his son Walter Jr., but the reason why he was late for it in the first place is because he was dealing with his other sort of son, Heisenberg's son, if you will, by dealing with Jesse Pinkman. And as I've talked about, it is kind of the whole poor Walter Jr. sort of theme here, where it is kind of interesting to think about how when Walt says to Jr. in the episode entitled Salud, by Jesse, when he's under the influence of those painkillers and alcohol, where he's sort of the cocktail of drugs that he's under sort of makes him, not tell the truth is probably not the best example, but it is a little bit sort of telling how he might have a stronger connection to Jesse Pinkman than he does to his own son. And I discussed this much more in the episode entitled Over, during that very intense scene with Walter Jr. and the tequila, and how his relationship with his son is not anywhere near as seemingly strong as it is with Jesse Pinkman, just in my humble opinion. And I discussed that much more in that episode if you want a more in-depth analysis of that. But yeah, it's a pretty telling scene here. And again, I love to play a little bit of this scene with the grand irony of Junior talking about how great his father is and how he would never do anything wrong, being juxtaposed with what we as the audience know and have seen Walter White do over the entire course of season 2 of Breaking Bad, and season 1 for that matter.
Decent. And he always does the right thing. And that's how he teaches me to be.
Would you say he's your hero?
Oh, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Totally. My dad is my hero.
And again, to extrapolate out even further, I mean, it's like I've talked about in respect to the betrayal that Skyler will eventually exhibit and display at the very end of this episode. I mean, Walter Jr. probably felt the exact same way when he blows up in the episode entitled Ozymandias, when he's overcome and flabbergasted by the fact that his hero, his father, was this horrible, terrible person. He just felt absolutely emotionally betrayed, as was every single person in Walter White's family, who really trusted him and really loved him and really took him at his word that he was who he was. And when the rug was pulled out from under all of them, just the unbelievable emotional betrayal of someone who you loved and cared about and trusted like that, lying to you in the way Walter White did, it's so powerful. Where, again, it's amazing to sort of think about the shift in perception, where initially you're thinking you understand why Walt is is telling all these lies, and you're saying it's for the greater good, it's to help his family, but it's so ironic and sobering and dark and tragic just how impacted his family was by all of the lies that Walter White told his family over the course of Breaking Bad. And this scene right here really made me think of that for sure, when Walter Jr. finally has that blow up in the episode entitled Granite State, where he basically just says, why don't you just die already? When he really feels that emotionally betrayed. It's the way it's so. I mean, I've repeated myself again and again and again, but it's so true what Peter Gould said about how after finishing all 6 seasons of Better Call Saul, you'll see Breaking Bad in an entirely new light. And I can never, ever, ever watch it the same way I watched it the very first time, or rewatched it the first 10 times prior to the existence of a Better Call Saul as the backstory prequel to Breaking Bad. And of course, finally here, the climax of this episode, where prior to his lobectomy cancer surgery, again, I think I said lobotomy the previous episode. That is the wrong term. Lobectomy is the right term. When you remove the cancer part of your lung that's inflicted with cancer, I believe. A very risky surgery, but as the doctor will say later down the line when it's successful, high risk, high reward, where he's bought himself some time when you cut out the cancer out of you completely. As he says, I'm not an oncologist, but eventually it will, you're just waiting for it to return. But of course, quite the still right here. Almost feel a little bit bad at laughing at this, but when Walt is under the heavy sedation of this pre-cancer drug to relax him prior to being administered the anesthesia, or maybe it's something even stronger. Maybe it's propofol. I'm not 100% sure. The milk of amnesia that Robin Williams and Michael Jackson. No, excuse me. I don't want to slander Robin Williams. That Michael Jackson was taking. Excuse me. I saw Robin Williams tell an anecdote about it. That Michael Jackson was using that sort of pre-heart surgery anesthetic. Walter White hasn't been administered that yet, but being under the influence of this drug, almost as a quasi-truth serum here. Yes, as Stone Yoda, as Smokeless Choice is absolutely saying, the House of Cards absolutely unravels here. Where following Skyler asking for his cell phone, following taking his glasses as well, knowing that he won't need either of them for the surgery. The catalyst by which Skyler realizes what path to go down to find her smoking gun and discover that she has unimpeachable proof that Walt has been lying to her is displayed to us right here in this scene. And I didn't see that perfectly.
Where's your phone? Your cell phone, did you bring it?
Which one?
There it is. That's the money shot. That's it. I mean, Skyler knows. Again, as I talked about at the very beginning of this episode, she knew all along. She knew something was wrong. She knew Walt was lying. She just couldn't prove it. To quote Charles McGill, she just couldn't prove it. And this slip up by Walter White, when he finally told the truth for once, as Skyler says to him, was the sort of not motivation, was the clear light at the end of the tunnel and the path she knew she had to go down to truly get her definitive proof and get her incontrovertible truth that Walt had been lying to her. And of course, we see that look on her face. We see that, expression. We see Skyler just being overcome with this, but of course, internalizing it in the moment, not wanting to blow up here because she still doesn't have that proof yet. It's that's Stone Yoda. You got me there. Yes, this chicanery he's done worse. It's true. You have she has no idea. This chicanery, this second cell phone chicanery, he's done much worse. At Stone Yoda, you got me there for sure. Wasn't expecting that one, but of course, following this and us, the foreshadowing of a Skyler eventually uncovering the truth at the end of this episode, we then see the surgery scene here. Pretty powerful montage scene for sure, where we see just the intensity and the gravity of this procedure and the risk of it as well. But of course, with Walter White being the main protagonist of Breaking Bad, definitely didn't think he would expire here in the surgery, and he doesn't. And of course, immediately following this, we learn that the surgery was a success and that he has bought himself some time. It's several weeks down the line. He's had time to recover from the surgery just based on the dialogue here in the scene of us knowing how old that Holly is, with us seeing that Walt has been recovered and has been recovering. And of course, immediately following a surgery, he wouldn't be in this state. He wouldn't be able to have this be in this state. And we learned that while Skyler was taking care of him in the moment right here and had not he was probably also likely in hospital care. I wouldn't imagine he was being taken care of at home. He was likely still in the hospital. But of course, we following this small talk that happens right here, including Walt saying he's feeling much better, and the doctor saying, the oncology surgeon saying that he's definitely bought himself some time. We then see Skyler ask the two doctors here, alluding to what is eventually going to happen here at the end of this episode of, can he be on his own? Can he be more independent? The doctor, of course, saying, use your best judgment, but of course, he's definitely he's bought himself some time, of course, definitely bastardizing the dialogue here for sure, so definitely going to play a little bit of the scene right here.
I mean, just more, independent.
Yes. Use your best judgment.
Now that's good news for you, honey. One less baby in the house.
Of course, Walt completely just in blissful ignorance here, thinking that he did it. This is sort of the grand irony of the scene, where a very Vladimir Lenin-esque looking Walter White here, following him growing out this goatee, in his mind he thinks, oh my goodness, I did it. I got away with everything scot-free. Not scot-free, but I can't believe I'm in this state right now. I can't believe how positive my life is. My cancer has not completely, but my tumor mass has shrunk by 80%. I survived this lobectomy surgery. The cancer was essentially cut out of me. I can maybe continue to live on for many more years. I have this $500,000. I've stabilized my relationship with my family. My meth cook partner is in rehab. Everything has been squared away. All is well that ends well. I can't believe I got away with it all. But of course, this is the last moment of bliss that Walter White has, because despite Walt thinking I did it, I got the money, I can provide for my family, I'm gonna keep on living, I'm getting Jesse's life squared away, everything is okay. The whole universe comes crashing down for Walter White here, following the scene of Donald Margolis prior to him crashing these two planes into one another at the very end of this episode. And of course, despite Walt thinking he's in the clear here completely, we know that Skyler is eventually going to leave him here, and despite him finally having the money, he's now ironically going to lose his family, which was the whole damn point of all of this, at least in the moment prior to him realizing that it was more about for him. And of course, the other looming threat that Walter White is completely ignorant to is that the wrath of the cartel in the Salamancas is barreling down on him in the moment right now. And the La Venganza, the Sangre por Sangre, the revenge of the cartel via the Salamancas, the cousins, for avenging the death of Tuco, is also barreling down on Walt. And despite him thinking, I'm done, I could theoretically be done with this. I have my $500,000. I could, hang it up and walk away and live happily ever after with my family. None of those dreams and aspirations will ever be materialized. And of course, following this, we then see the story ebb or flow back to the B C. Well, it's not really even a B story. It's the one. It's kind of subset of the main story that's been taking place this entire time. But after these several weeks that transpire following Walter White's lobectomy, we then learn that following taking many weeks off following the death of his daughter, that Donald Margolis is also going back into work, where he says himself that, after a certain amount of time off really doesn't help, and it's just, better to get back to work, focused on the moment right here and right now. Kind of just thinking, I would imagine that, he wants to keep on living his life, and he wants to go on. He does have a lot more life to live from a physical standpoint, but as we can see from this very final scene, he just was unable to do so, and he was just absolutely still caught up with emotion here. And whatever, again, we don't know the thought process in Donald Margolis' head. We don't know if he actually thought he was better. We don't know what was going on. We don't know if he thought he was better, but when he got there, and he even says the word Jane as a result of the navigation and the traffic control, that just triggered this sort of white noise zoning out, which eventually caused this plane crash. And even this sort of small talk scene that he has with his colleague here in respect to, it's terrible what happened. We're so sorry. It's kind of again, I keep using this word sobering, but it's so true how, I feel like we don't do a very good job talking about death in our society. And again, it's such a hard subject matter to discuss, especially here making small talk at work. It's such an awkward and, uncomfortable subject matter where we can see his colleague here not even really even knowing what to say. Just saying, it's terrible, I'm so sorry. And that's basically all he can say. There's not more sort of he can extrapolate, or I don't know, maybe they're not too close. Maybe I'm sort of overthinking it here in this scene. But yeah, just a lot of thoughts just racing in my head in respect to this scene right here. And of course, I feel like in this moment right here, despite me not realizing what was going to happen in respect to that cold opening black and white scene, when Donald Margolis shows up back to work right here, this is of course prior to us knowing exactly what he does. It was never revealed to us he was an air traffic controller. But of course, when even this scene right here, I just kind of got the feeling that something is going to happen here. Like, what in the world is going to happen here with Donald Margolis? And of course, when it's eventually revealed to us he's an air traffic controller, if the neon blinking words of plane crash aren't just blinking on the screen here as you're watching this episode, it's just so abundantly clear and obvious here in the scene. And again, the thoughts of, just thinking how he was able to internalize this and not be overwhelmed by this. That was sort of the misdirection that was presented to us by the creators here in the scene. But of course, when it is finally revealed that he is an air traffic controller, it's again, if the writing wasn't clearly on the wall here that this plane crash, he was going to be the one who caused these two planes to crash. It's it was pretty obvious at this moment in time for sure. At Smuggler's Choice, I used to be an undertaker. Couldn't exactly talk to my friends about the details about my job. I worked in removals for funeral homes and the coroner on 24-hour call. Yeah, I know it's a pretty morbid process by which to prepare formerly living bodies for open caskets and things to that effect. They actually sort of parodied it on F is for Family, and the process by which, the very sort of morbid process by which you have to do to, I'm telling you how to do, you know way more than me, but the very morbid process by which you have to prepare a formerly living body to make it so it can be prepared for an open casket, and I do know it's quite intense. And again, it's not a very fun subject matter. I'm sort of proving my own point, how no one wants to talk about this subject matter. We all like to pretend it doesn't exist, and we all like to sort of distort that reality. But it's just sort of a fleeting thought that went through my mind in respect to the small talk of that scene with his colleague, basically not really knowing what to say in respect to the death of someone's daughter. It's it's a pretty intense scene to watch. I will take your word for it at Smokeless Choice. And like I said, I'm proving my own point where it's not a comfortable subject matter to discuss at all. And of course, immediately following this, we then see Walt checking out his goatees, telling Skyler, I think I may just keep this. Of course, this will be the look that Walter White will eventually sport for the remainder of Breaking Bad, prior to him growing out his beard, following him moving to New Hampshire. But of course, at Stone Yoda, you stole the words right out of my mouth. Skyler's monologue in this scene is underrated in my opinion. Walt is at near complete loss for words. Fantastic writing. Unmute the mic there, don't want to make that mistake. And we've all seen this scene, as I've alluded to right here. As I've been talking to again and again, Walt becomes Lex Luthor. I like it at Smokeless Choice. This scene that has been building and all the themes that I've been talking about in respect to Skyler getting her clear-cut evidence, the clear emotional betrayal that she exhibited, all the themes that I've talked about over this live stream coming to full ahead here in the scene where Skyler puts two and two together, calls Walt out on every single lie that we as the audience saw over the course of Breaking Bad, and all the things that we as the audience already know, Skyler finally putting everything together. And of course, I can't do the scene justice by describing it. There's so much here. It is really an underrated monologue. It's such a powerful scene. I can't show it, unfortunately, but I do want to play some of the audio because it is just such a powerful scene. And I'm when Skyler really puts everything together, it's I just was so immersed in this this unbelievable monologue that she delivers here, and totally has all of Walt's lies totally unravel in front of his face.
We'll pick up Walter Jr. from school. You'll have the house to yourself for 2 days. I want you to pack your things and leave.
Why would I do that?
Hank has offered to help, since you shouldn't be doing any heavy lifting.
Skylar.
I want you gone by Monday morning. I want you gone.
And of course, Walt initially tries to dig his heels in here and say, can you at least tell me why? Skylar, of course, saying because you're a liar, initially bringing up the second cell phone, the same allegation that she brought up against him in the episode entitled Bit by Dead Bee, which Walt denied. Him, of course, in the moment thinking he's just being called out for something he said while he was medicated. And definitely, when rewatching this scene, you definitely think that Walt is convincing himself that he's going to be able to lie his way out and tell and half-truth his way out of the scene, digging his heels in here again and again. But of course, eventually, Skylar tells him, that she called Gretchen. And as I said, that lie that he told Gretchen really being the lie that hangs by a thread. And if that is ever cut, the entire story completely unravels. And that reveal here is truly powerful. And Walt basically knows he's done. His goose is cooked here for all intents and purposes.
Your fugue state? I had to believe that, didn't I? I had to find a way. I mean, who would lie about such a thing?
The emotional betrayal again.
You tell me, Skylar. You tell me exactly what it is you think I'm lying about. What? An affair? I'm having an affair. Is that what you think?
That's what I was thinking, yeah, for the
Well,
last
definitely
few
digging
weeks.
his heels in here, thinking he can
Who am I
alibi his
having
way
an
out of
affair
it.
with?
Well, my guess was Gretchen Schwartz. Something was going on between you. I just knew.
Jesus, Skylar. Get me a Bible to swear on if that's
The
what it
confidence
takes. I
here,
am
the
not
confidence
having
he's
an
still
affair with
exhibiting.
Gretchen.
Oh, I know you're not. Because I asked her.
Oof. The look on his face.
It really took me forever to get in touch with her. She was ducking my calls for weeks. So I finally left a message. What exactly is going on between you and my husband? I thought that'd get her attention, and it did. So she called me back, and she finally told me. The money for your treatment, Gretchen and Elliot didn't give you a dime.
I mean, it's a powerful scene. It's a powerful scene to see all those lies unravel. It really is. It really is through and through. And of course, again, just adding insult to injury here, where Skylar then puts two and two together, saying, where did that money come from? Of course, following this, she then says, where in the world did this come from? But she thought maybe your mom that you went to visit for 4 days, maybe she had some money tucked away that you weren't telling me about. But of course, the further betrayal that she exhibits here, again, she clearly has thought about this and ruminated on this for weeks. And she has just thought about this again and again and again. This speech and this monologue just seems so down pat to exactly what Skylar wanted to tell Walt, and all the sort of lies unraveling right in his face. But again, just the further betrayal where she knew that something was going on with the second cell phone, and then finding out this entirely new lie that Walt was also telling her in respect to the fact that he disappeared for 4 entire days and did not tell her where he was going, and just not even comprehending what in the world he was lying about, and just truly exhibiting this unbelievable emotional betrayal by her husband.
She didn't even know that you have cancer. You never went to see her. I dropped you at the airport. I picked you up. You were gone for 4 days. And yet she swears that you were never there.
Again, you can just see how ambushed Walt is in this scene. He was so unprepared for this. He was so caught off his guard. And at the same time, he knows she is spot on everything. She figured it all out. It's a powerful scene, and of course, when Walt sort of initially insists on trying to get her to not leave, she says to him, for once, can you do me the service of not denying it. Of course, following this, Walt then begs and pleads and says, if you stay, I'll tell you, if you stay, if I tell you everything, will you stay? And of course, it is very true in respect to Skylar can probably not even comprehend what in the world her husband was lying about. Just all this emotional betrayal. Where in the world did he come up with $100,000 to pay off his chemotherapy treatment? What in the world is he hiding from me? This is even worse than anything I could have conceived and imagined. And as she will say, whatever it is, I'm too afraid to know.
If I tell you the truth, will you stay? Stay, and I will tell you everything.
Whatever it is, I'm afraid to know.
And again, I mean, it's a very powerful scene through and through. And again, I don't want to undercut just the power of this scene, but it's kind of funny. I did sort of think about how eventually Skylar would use the blackjack card counting fabrication in order to explain all of that money as a means by which he can pay for Hank's physical therapy following him getting shot by the cousins. And I do wonder if Walt, in the moment, if he could have come up with, I'm a gambler and that's why I was where I made all this money from, and how, being a card counter is a much more socially acceptable and legal means to acquire all this money as opposed to selling methamphetamine. So I feel like in the moment, Walt could have maybe come up with that alibi, but again, he didn't even consider that. Skylar was the one who eventually came up with that alibi. So it's John Doman, Walt's thinking up his new lie. Again, he was so caught off guard there. And he wasn't just, I don't think he was, I don't even know what he would have said if Skylar said yes. I mean, would he have told her everything? I mean, I don't know. Even when she's eventually confronts him in the season 3 premiere, where she tells him he's a drug dealer, and that almost sort of infamous, that very sort of almost terrible acting with the sort of benefits of the audience knowing how Walt is not telling the truth. There, it is kind of pretty telling and a pretty intense scene for sure. But of course, following this, we then see the final payoff here, where as I stated, I believe when Donald Margolis mentions the word Jane, that's sort of very intentional. The term Jane is a sort of code term that's mentioned here when directing the planes via the air traffic control, if I'm not 100% mistaken.
Clear direct Albuquerque, climb and maintain 17,000. Juliet Mike 21, turn left heading 115.
I think I overskipped it.
The aircraft calling, please stand by. Jane Mike 21, turn heading.
Yeah, you can definitely see the Jane Mike 21 turning. We can see Donald then compose himself. And of course, the scene eventually builds to his sort of negligence or not paying attention. Again, was it negligence? Was he literally white noise? Was he completely zoning out here? Was this sort of, that trope of someone going through white noise where they truly are just can't even comprehend what's going on in front of them? Did he almost black out here because of the grief that he was dealing with when directing these two planes? Again, we'll never know. We'll never know what was going through Donald Margolis' head, but what we do know is that sort of composed nature of his emotions was absolutely a fabrication, and he truly was experiencing unbelievable grief and had not dealt with his emotions and demons from the death of his daughter and maybe his own perceived culpability and being complicit in the death of his daughter. And that's what causes these two planes to collide at the end of this episode. And yeah, it's such a powerful scene here. We've all seen it when the two planes collide overhead. A lot of great CGI work here by the creators, and of course this great shot of the bear eventually falling in the pool. We also see the sort of POV shot of the bear rotating mid-flight, where it can see the debris overhead. They talk about how they got this shot on the Insider Podcast. It's pretty cool, the sort of mechanics by which they got it. And of course, eventually, the very final parting shot here, where the very first scene that we ever see of that bear floating in the pool was also the very last scene where we see the bear floating in the pool, thus displaying to us the full story, the full culmination of the entire story of Season 2 of Breaking Bad. So yeah, I mean, a great season, a powerful episode through and through. And again, as I talked about a little bit in the very first review of 737, when we see the teddy bear for the very first time, the pink bear, in respect to all those themes. But the grand sort of overarching premise here, I suppose, is sort of the unintended consequences of Walter White's actions, the butterfly effect, if you will, and how this seemingly small decision in the grand scheme of the universe for Walter White to cook methamphetamine indirectly led to the death of 137 people in this plane crash that's what will be revealed to us in the season 3 premiere of Breaking Bad. And just sort of thinking about the sort of moral complicity of Walter White in this plane crash and the death of all of these people, and the sort of, the young person that clearly owned and was the owner of this pink teddy bear, definitely haunting for sure at Smokeless Choice. And thinking about the young child that died as a consequence of Walter White's actions here in this scene. And it is kind of funny when you hear people talk about the concept of empathy, and how it is kind of crazy where when one character like Howard Hamlin dies, who we as the audience know in much greater detail than the 137 people who are in this plane who we don't know, the nameless, faceless people who we never knew, we never met, we don't know anything about their personality, their lives, their backstory, their hopes, their dreams, and their aspirations. At least speaking for myself, I know maybe you're different. There definitely is a sort of less natural empathy you have compared to someone passing away. It's just I don't know what the reasoning behind it is in respect to human biology and human psychology, but it's definitely the case. I mean, just the way you view 137 deaths as more of just a statistic. It's just a number. You don't really think and comprehend about every single individual death. And like I said, the hopes and dreams and lives and aspirations and the backstories and the complexities and the relationships of all those 137 people, our brains just don't work that way, for better or for worse. And I don't know, maybe it would just be too distressing, and we wouldn't even be able to just do anything in life if we sort of stopped and had empathy to that level. I don't know, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. Again, I don't know, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, that was sort of my at least in the moment here, when even watching this for the very first time, just thinking about the unintended consequences of Walter White's actions, and how, despite the universe being so grand and us being so small, our actions still have extremely powerful and consequential moments in the moment, right here and right now. And despite our actions seemingly being so small and insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe, right now, they do affect real people and real lives. And that's sort of that's at least my interpretation of this final scene here in this season 2 finale of Breaking Bad. But yeah, it was a unbelievable episode through and through. Yeah, definitely some great great calls to season 3 of Breaking Bad for sure at Stone Yoda. But yeah, this was an unbelievable episode, and yeah, it was, again, there's a special place in my heart for these first 2 seasons, as corny as that sound. The sort of more lighthearted nature, despite how incredibly dark, and the sort of how powerful the themes are that are present here in this episode and over the course of these first 2 seasons. And yeah, it's just crazy to think about where this show will eventually go next season. And like I said, I guess the sort of saving grace in Walter White, I don't know, at least in terms of a more philosophical term, is that maybe if Walt was thinking how he ruined everything and thought, if I only could just keep this lie to myself, I would have been able to save my family. Unbeknownst to him, he was in the game, and like I said, the Salamanca threat was looming, as will eventually be displayed in the premiere of season 3 of Breaking Bad. And I don't know about you, but I binged these first 3 seasons on Netflix, so I didn't have a lot of time to ruminate on this conclusion. I immediately watched the premiere of season 3 immediately following this episode. I only can imagine what it would be like to ruminate on this episode for an entire year until the premiere of season 3 of Breaking Bad. But yeah, it was a great episode to talk about through and through. and I really enjoyed talking about these first 2 seasons of Breaking Bad in these retrospectives. But with that, I am going to have to end it here. I really do appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight and watching this stream at John Doman. They never showed us Walt using his product, but sometimes he acted like he was. That's an interesting point you make there for sure, John Doman. I see what you did there. But yes, I'm gonna end it here. I hope you have a great rest of your evening and a great weekend. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. In terms of a scheduling note, it actually might be a little bit of a while until I do the next stream of season 3 of Breaking Bad. The way my schedule is going right now, actually starting in April, which is in a couple hours from now, less than a couple hours from now, my schedule really ratchets up, and it may be a while until you see a stream of season 3 of Breaking Bad. With my schedule being what it is, it's definitely going to be. It may be a little bit more intermittent, but I don't really want to get into sort of, if I do it, I kind of want to completely commit to it. I like this sort of doing it every single week on every Friday, but my schedule's kind of changing coming up, and what I'm doing in my real life, as I like to say, kind of prevents me from doing so. But again, we'll see what happens, and we'll see what the future holds for doing these retrospectives. But yes, like I said, I just feel like, following the conclusion of season 2, I feel like it's a good stopping point for the time being in respect to my schedule. But yes, like I said, I really appreciate everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support that's been given to this channel. I really appreciate the super chat at Kate Valentine and this stream and all the previous streams. Again, I really do appreciate the support. I'm really humbled by the fact that people enjoy watching watching these streams and having me talk about this show. And yeah, it's pretty much all I got for you, I guess. And yeah, that's I guess that's pretty much it. But yeah, again, I guess it may be a while. I'll see you guys when I see you, hopefully soon. Take it easy. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you guys around.